In this second demonstration, we are going to model the seat of this chair. So what we want to do first is, again, go and take a look at all reference images that are available to get better idea of what this object looks like and to think which modeling technique is better to apply in this particular case. Now let's switch to 3D Studio Max window, and as you can see, we already have almost finished model of a chair with the backrest from previous tutorial already in place, and the only part that is missing is the seat, so we are going to model it from scratch. For that, we are not going to bring any reference image and place it on a background like we did in first tutorial. We are going to model the seat by using this geometry as a visual reference for the size of the seat object. So let's go to top view and copy this geometry, and then let's isolate it. Now what we want to do is to apply slice modifier and slice off the bottom part of the object just below the frame that holds the seat. Now we need to collapse this object into editable poly and apply slice modifier one more time. But this time let's slice off the top part of this geometry right above the frame that holds the seat. Now let's convert this object into editable poly again, and as you can see from the top view, now this object is good enough to be used as a visual reference for the size of the seat. The only place that might require a little bit of improvement is these little openings in what used to be the legs of a chair. So let's go ahead and select open borders of this editable poly object and cap them by pushing cap button. Okay, now we want to create square plane object that will completely cover the entire sitting area, and let's go ahead and push plane button on the command panel. Position your mouse cursor in the middle of the sitting area, and while holding control button on your keyboard, click left mouse button on your mouse and start dragging your mouse until you see that the object that you're creating is completely cover the sitting area. So once you do that and you're satisfied with the result, we need to change the number of length and width segments to 2, because by default this number is going to be different. So once you do that, we can convert our object into editable poly, and we are ready to move on to the next step. For the next step, we want to go to polygon submode of our editable poly object and select all top polygons, and then we need to delete them. Then we go to vertex submode and select top and vertices of this object, and then we need to activate 2.5 snap tool and then start moving these vertices down until they snap to the bottom end vertices of this object. Now obviously we have 2 superimposed vertices on each side of the object, and we need to weld them. So in order to do this, we select them with the window selection, then we click this little button right next to the weld button, and that will bring up weld dialog window where we can input some numbers. So here for the weld threshold, put any number greater than 0. And you can see that obviously something happened. Some vertices got welded. You can see the number of vertices before and after has changed. So that's pretty much what we want, and you can click OK. Now switch to edge submode and select opposite edges on both sides of our editable poly object, and then let's bring up the connect dialog window by clicking this small button next to connect button, and for the number of segment input 26. That will create 26 new edges that will be connecting originally selected opposite edges. Then let's add this middle edge to the selection, and what we want to do next is to convert these vertical selected edges to the spline object. So we can do this by clicking this button, create shape from selection, And when you click it, you will be prompted to choose what type of spline would you like to get. Do you want it to be smooth or do you want it to be linear? So in our case, we want it to be linear, so choose linear and click OK. You can exit from Edge sub mode now, and you can also delete editable poly object. And what you can see left on your screen besides our reference object is this editable spline that we have just created. And first thing that we want to do with this spline is we want to make it visible. We want to give it some volume. So you can do this by applying two check marks over these two check boxes next to enable in render and enable in viewport settings. And we also want to change number of sides that defines the level of detail of this object. Now you can push Shift button on your keyboard and move this object anywhere on your screen, and that will prompt you to create a copy. So make a copy of this object and rotate it 90 degrees along Z-axis. Now this is very important that you position this copy the way you can see I position it on my screen. So this is very important, so you should do it the same way. Now we need to create another copy of this object by doing the same thing. Just push Shift button on the keyboard, drag this object and create a copy. Rotate it 90 degrees along Z-axis. And again, this is important, position it the way you see I did it. And now we need to follow the same steps to create another copy of this object the same way. Rotate it 90 degrees and place it to fit this empty space that is left. So the result will look similar to what you see on this screen. Now let's go ahead and attach all these four objects into one editable spline object by clicking this attach button and picking three other objects. And now we temporarily can uncheck enable in render and enable in viewport checkboxes to bring it back to this linear appearance. And we also want to make a couple minor adjustments to this object. First, we want to reposition it so that virtual diagonal lines at its lower half would go through virtual centers of the front legs of this chair. Now after our spline object has been repositioned, you can see that its center is not aligned with the center of the reference image, so we need to make another adjustment. Let's go ahead and pick FFD 4x4x4 modifier and apply it to this object, and that will allow us to control the deformation of spline object by moving these control points of FFD modifier. And let's select 4 central control points of FFD modifier and move it down just a little bit, so that will bring virtual center of editable spline object more closer to the center of the reference object. You not necessarily need to align those two centers, because that would deform our spline object too much, but just try to do your best to improve the look of spline just a little bit. And when you see the result that you're satisfied with, you can convert this object into editable spline, and now we're ready to move on to the next step. For the next step, we want to clean up our editable spline object. So go to segment or spline submode. In this case, this is segment submode. And follow my example and select and delete segments of editable spline object that are outside of what eventually will be turned into the seating area. So as you can see, I selected and deleted segments at the bottom right corner, at the bottom left corner, top left corner, and top right corner.